Hey, hello, welcome. I am so happy to be here with all of you today. I am Mimi Hicklin. I'm the program coordinator at the Charter for Compassion, and I'm joined by our executive director, Marilyn Turkovich, and our guest of honor, Neil Gorenflo, the executive director of Shareable. Every month, the Charter hosts a webinar featuring the work of our compassionate communities across the globe. And today we are meeting with charter partner Shareable. Founded in 2009, Shareable is an award-winning nonprofit media outlet, action network, and consultancy that empowers people to share for a more resilient, equitable, and joyful world. Shareable offers valuable opportunities for our charter partners and communities to connect and amplify the work that they are doing. So before we dive in, I want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. We're recording this session, so anyone who registered, look for an email from me in the next day or two. And we invite folks to post questions or comments you may have in the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we'll also be sharing this on social media. So hello to those of you who are viewing after the fact. I think that's it in terms of nitty gritty. So let's dive into the good stuff.
Yeah, great. Mimi, thank you for the introduction, and so happy to be here and get the invite. Really fans of your work and see a lot of parallels and ways that we complement each other. I think the people who will be joining either live or after the fact, the recording, we'll see some of the parallels. And so what I'll do, very straightforward, share what Shareable's all about, share our top resources. So I've got some goodies for you guys, and then talk about our Sharing Cities work. One of the campaigns where Shareable's had one of our largest impacts. So I want to share that story and also a piece of the vision of what a Sharing Cities is through examples, so through solutions. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and share some slides with you guys. Yeah, so the basics about Shareable. We're a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 2009. Our mission is to empower communities to share, people in communities to share. And we do that, as we said, through our publishing, our campaigns, and also consulting. And we're most known for our publishing. On our site, we have something like over 5,000 articles about solutions. So our archive is packed full of people-powered solutions for the common good. And we have a kind of our own brand of solutions journalism. So we really focus on sort of underappreciated and new cutting-edge solutions for common space management of resources, or just ways that people are sharing, either informally or through a project or even a formal organization. And yeah, so this is how we made our name and how most people know us. We won a couple of awards, the Society of Professional Journalists for explanatory journalism. So for pieces that really explain solutions well. We also do campaigns. And so we've done both partnered with organizations on their campaigns, like Greenpeace and their Make Something Week campaign. But we've done our own campaigns like Map Jam and ShareFest. And these campaigns have been sort of global distributed events where we've invited our readers to host an event, and we give them a toolkit to do it, and they take that toolkit and organize an event that makes sense to them, make it their own, right? And the Map Jam was about small groups getting together to map all their sharing resources in their neighborhood or their city, and then to share that map. And as a kind of beginning step to start thinking about their community and knowing their community as a different kind of place, a place that might have much more to share than people realize. That was one of the psychological effects of people doing these map jams, that they had a new appreciation for all that they had access to when they took stock of it. And usually what we did was, we had hundreds of these map jam events went off around the world. In 2 years that we held the map jams, and then we followed it with ShareFest, so asking the same folks who kind of map their area, all the sharing resources in their area, the time banks, the tool libraries, the free stuff, like if you could get free mulch in your city or something like that, the co-ops, the credit unions, all of those, people-powered economic solutions. Once that they were mapped, then invite everyone together to showcase to the community through a sharing festival or a ShareFest, all of those things, and engage people in their local, real sharing economy. And so there were a few hundred of those ShareFests, and they ranged from, maybe a clothing swap one evening to 3-day full-on festivals, to even one of the largest suburbs in Paris did a week-long festival that had many not other organizations involved, and dozens of events across the suburb. It was really fantastic. There were my colleague Tom Llewellyn spoke there, had dinner with the mayor of the suburb, and announced after dinner, the next morning, they were going to start a tool library in the town. So that gives you an idea of how involved they could be in these campaigns. And they're really fun to do because people would take our idea and make it their own, and the diversity of what people were doing was very inspiring. And as these campaigns unfolded, we would report on them and showcase what individuals and groups were doing. This really built this kind of momentum around it. So that was really fun. That's what we do in our campaigns. And then we recently started doing some consulting, taking what we've learned from communicating and solutions journalism and campaigns, and helping mission-aligned organizations and researchers with their communications strategies and execution. So a little bit about Shareable, and then just some of the history too, just to get you could get a feel for the impact that we've had. So in 2000, when we launched in 2009, we were the first publisher to write about the sharing economy on a consistent basis. Almost the kind of journal of record, if you will, and we broke that sharing economy story. And at the time, a lot of these sharing economies companies were small and communitarian oriented, and that changed when all the capital rolled in, and we changed our tune and started focusing more on the organizations that were more mission oriented and for the common good. But this we helped put sharing on the map as a strategy for change making. That was really important to us. When we started Shareable, I had trouble hiring writers. They didn't want to write for us. They didn't know who we were. It was a strange, no one had this beat. Fast forward to today, many top tier news organizations cover what we started to cover regularly in 2009. So we've changed the media landscape in an important way, talking about this alternative way of change making and economy, a kind of counter narrative to a sort of neoliberal view of the economy and society. And we So I'll just pick a few of these. In 2011, we started the global sharing cities movement. We had an event in San Francisco bringing together the idea of the sharing economy and cities, and envisioned together with the community a multi-stakeholder group, multi-sectoral group, envisioned cities as a platform for sharing and how that could be amplified. That we launched the Sharing Cities Network shortly after that. When the sharing economy started to go, hyper capitalistic, let's say, I noticed and hired writer Nathan Schneider to write a feature story about the alternative, which later became called the platform co-op movement. Where you mesh a platform co-op with or the cooperative ownership and governance model with a platform business model. That feature story catalyzed the movement, and now there are conferences and research organizations and a growing cadre of platform co-ops. And then just fast forward to 2018, we launched, after launching that Sharing Cities movement, we continued with our coverage, published the first ever policy guide for sharing in cities, and then, eventually wrote a book, putting a stake in the ground and about our vision for our sharing cities, wanting to keep that movement on track to be something for, that was commons oriented, for the common good, not strictly about the market, but with a relationship to, the market and government. And that's been our most popular book. So I'll share a link so you can get the book, but the book is shares that sharing cities vision through policies and also case studies. So it's, it really shows that it's, in the book, in the introduction, I write about it being a kind of concrete utopia, that the all the solutions are there for a sharing cities, for a commons-based democratic economy in cities. They just need to be pulled together. And there's low awareness about a lot of these solutions. And certainly when there is awareness about one solution, people don't realize that there are a kind of collection around them that could make a more holistic kind of system. Please get that book. I'll give you the link in a second. And so that's just a little bit about our history, and then our top resource. So these are the goodies. These are the things, tools that you can use. People come to our site and use it all kinds of different ways, in their business plans, in their, take the content and use it in their research projects, and their, academic work, and, journal articles and so forth. So, we have this 5,000 article archive that you can mine. Part of that is our 300 how to share guides, everything from like how to start a worker co-op to a housing co-op to, throwing a clothing swap, you name it. So that's really a unique thing on the web. There's nothing like our how to share guides, our collection of how to share guides. We've got 10 books, most of them ebooks and self-published, but we have some, we've been published by, traditional publishers as well. And then check out our response podcast and documentary. So it's, the response is about community response to disaster, how these incredible sharing communities arise in response to disaster. Communities come together, people come together and help each other, and sometimes rebuild their communities for the better, on a different kind of basis, a more fair or democratic basis, or at least there is an attempt to do this. And this is a very grassroots movement. This isn't about the government's response or how business response, is about how ordinary people come together and what they do together. And some of the stories are it's incredibly inspiring and also poignant. And, there's loss in there, of course, as well. and these are very well produced documentary style audio podcasts, professionally done, like, NPR, PBS, like, level. And then, get our newsletter just to stay in touch and all the latest things that we're publishing and doing, and ways you can get involved and even hire us. And so here's the link for our book. Get your free guide. It's something like, 270 pages of goodies, man. It's just super inspiring stuff. You'll read this and, you may never, see cities quite the same way again. And then I wanted to share what we've done with Sharing Cities, how this movement unfolded and everything, and some of the examples from the book, some not from the book too. Well, it all kicked off with an event we hosted, as I said, in San Francisco in 2011. Lisa Gansky was one of the keynotes. She's a Silicon Valley, investor, entrepreneur, and commons advocate. And she keynoted with me, and also Jay Nath, at the time, was the Chief Innovation Officer of San Francisco. It was just a catalytic event that San Francisco got really interested in what we were talking about and what was happening. Had meetings with more meetings with Jay and also the mayor. That led to Mayor Lee launching the Sharing Economy Working Group in 2012. He keynoted this meeting at SPUR, which is the urban policy think tank in San Francisco. It's 100 years old. They have this huge meeting room. It was this launch event for the Sharing Economy Working Group was the most attended event in their history, and there was press from all over the country covering it. And that also was catalytic. Seoul, South Korea, Mayor Park there. Seoul is a sister city to San Francisco, and they went, I think, 1 or 2 or 10 steps better in a program called Sharing Cities Seoul, which was with the goal of making sharing an integral part of the lifestyle of residents in the biggest, one of the biggest mega cities in the world, 25 million people in the metro area there. And it had 3 basic components to it. It had making a promotional and communication campaign around making sharing, a part of the lifestyle. And also there's a policy piece, and then also kind of business incubation piece, so getting sharing startups the support they need to scale and have the impact that they were looking for. This is, ongoing project, launched in 2012. They've had 3 different strategies. They've just launched their 3rd strategy for Sharing Cities. And they are, have been shifting to a kind of more commons-based approach, or, for Sharing Cities, less about, startups and platform and big, corporate platforms, and more about, what we consider kind of a real sharing economy with a commons-based sort of political economy. So they, when Mayor Park, announced this and invited us to be advisors. So I've been an advisor to Seoul since this time. This was also catalytic, and other cities saw what Seoul was doing and followed suit. And now somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 cities have some form of sharing city program. Some are as elaborate as in Seoul, and some are, fairly modest. It just, it depends on the city and their circumstances and resources. So it became a global movement. And just, to give you an idea of what a sharing cities could be or is, just share some examples. And cities, like I said, they are and can be even more platforms for sharing. When you start to think of them like that, then it kind of opens your imagination to what's possible, with that kind of framing. And you start thinking on the lines, as we have, of what in the city can be infrastructure for sharing. And so the streets can be infrastructure for sharing. They're a public space In Barcelona, they have this project called Superblocks where they block off a 3x3 or 9 square block area to through traffic and have like much slower speeds for the local traffic, and then open up space, especially at intersections, for community life. Just, for exercise, for socialization, and also for micro enterprise and community projects. So they can be, the street can be an incubation space for, a tool library or some kind of, community project. This is one of my favorite food related sharing enterprises, Food Cloud, and they just divert masses of amounts, tons of food that would otherwise go to landfill to food banks across the UK, and through volunteers and technology and delivery drivers and so forth, they're having a huge impact. 50 million meals and 22,000 tons of food diverted, and saving charities a bunch of money too. So this is what's possible at even with a kind of modest sized NGO. This is the kind of impact you can have if you get creative about how to match sort of idle resources or resources that would go to waste to where there's need. Segue Park in Malmo is this sharing neighborhood that's being built. They've already broken ground for it, and this is a representative of development I see across the globe. Sort of a move from green building and adding on top of green building a kind of sharing modality. So this is Segue Park, will have bike sharing and car sharing and co-working and cooperative housing and community gardening, tool library, and more. So really excited about this. And it's also, excuse me, a piece of this is to have much more modestly sized individual units, but much more amenities and shared spaces. So there's kind of trade-off of private space for more shared space and more services and community. So this is potentially a way that real estate developers, a win-win-win, developers win, residents win, city wins. These moby hubs, in the Netherlands are neighborhood scale transportation hubs. So you take an ordinary like taxi or bus stop and you add in some of the shared mobility into it, and it can be, increase access to transportation, in neighborhoods that maybe, were a transportation desert or not well served. So it can be a way to increase equity and, get people out of their cars and to use, use public transportation and other modalities. So really cool, spreading across Europe, not anything in North America quite yet, as I understand it. We're going to be doing a story on this, so stay tuned on that. And then libraries as sharing hubs. So more and more libraries are becoming libraries of things. They, already are a sharing hub and are kind of amplifying that, offering everything from musical instruments to small appliances, to sporting goods. The sky's really limit, and often these collections reflect like the needs of the communities and the activities of the communities that where their libraries are located. But it's not just libraries becoming sharing hubs; it's also schools, apartment buildings, where people gather. That's where you can have a sharing hub. Participatory budgeting. This is just a way, it's a very simple idea, kind of direct democracy. Those who pay taxes get to decide how those taxes are spent in their neighborhood. Usually it's not like the whole 100% of the city budget or 100% of the budget that applies to a specific neighborhood, but often a significant percentage. And usually it starts with a small percentage and then builds as people get into it. And typically the way it's done is people actually get together in person to brainstorm, vet ideas, refine those ideas, and vote on them, and then fund them. And then also participate in, to some extent, participate in the execution of those projects. You know, and they can be, you know, all kinds of different things, from, you know, putting traffic signals in, you know, to little micro parks and things like this. And, you know, probably also bigger things. And then, you know, if you are a mayor, or the sort of economic developer of your area, or your or your city, you need to really seriously think about having a worker ownership or cooperative strategy for your area, because worker-owned businesses and worker cooperatives usually pay more wage-wise. They're not throwing all the profits up to investors and management. They're more resilient in downturns. They last longer, and they stay put. They don't get bought up and move out, right? So if you want a resilient, strong local economy, you need to have a co-op strategy in there. And this is just a street scene from Quebec, or Montreal in Quebec, and in that region, something like 13% of the economy is part of what they call the social and solidarity economy. So, you know, cooperative, worker or user owned. So that's, you know, it for my presentation. Just welcome any questions, and yeah, get your free book.
Thanks a lot, Neil. You know, there are some questions, and so maybe I can just read you one or two of them,
Okay.
and that might invite others to join in. I was hoping that you might be able to tell us a little bit more about your toolbox, and exactly, you know, how it's set up, how people use it. So that's probably the first question.
So our main, I guess, toolbox, maybe we have a couple toolboxes. I mean, you know, one of them is our website, and, you know, which is public and everyone can access it. You know, I would specifically, like I said, go and check out our how to share guides. There's 300 of them. And so, I mean, if you want to do more sharing in your life, in your home or your neighborhood, just take a gander at that, and something might strike you like, oh, I want to do that. You know, and they're also, and some of these have a more permanent character. They're like ongoing projects, like if you do a tool library or any kind of lending library, because people are doing all kinds of lending libraries, toys, kitchen equipment, general lending libraries, and tool libraries are also very, very popular. And then there are ones that are more temporal or just event-based, you know, like swaps and things like that. Another toolbox is just our skills and the services that we offer. You know, we've kind of soft launched this new service called Shareable Studio, and we're helping researchers and NGOs and mission-aligned companies and campaigns, you know, in their communications efforts. And often, you know, for example, some of the academic institutions and researchers we've been working with is when they write a research grant, there's a little section about how they're going to disseminate the research. And this is becoming a more and more important aspect of their work. And this is not what they do. They really need to keep their nose down on the research and make sure it's, you know, they're hitting the marks on the research, and they can plug us into that part of their grant, and we co-apply for the grant. So that's one way it's working. We're also example of a work we're doing with Tufts University and their urban planning department. They have a colloquium series called Cities at Tufts that's led by our board chair, actually, Julian Agaman, you know, super kind of a superstar in his space, and a great guy. And so we have an 11 event series this fall that we're doing all the promotion for, and also packaging up kind of what you guys are doing with your series. And we're just, helping out on the media end and the promotion end of it, and increasing the audience for it, tenfold, something like that. So it really elevates Tufts and Julian's work, and also the people that are in the series, which is, I think, important, and the focus of the series is, equity and urban planning. So those are, a couple toolboxes. Does that answer your question, Marilyn?
No, it does. And, I was just wondering, we have all these compassionate city initiatives, and I'm wondering if you would have a suggestion for a short-term shareable project that would really entice people to get involved with a compassionate cities movement, something that would be, I think, profitable for people, and that doesn't mean financially, but would entice people to want to come back to participate in a shareable event, and to perhaps spark a way for people in cities to get to know one another.
Yeah, that's a great question. Couple ideas. First of all, I just want to speak to the sort of parallels or overlap between compassionate cities and sharing cities is that, sharing has this there is a kind of technical definition of, about sharing can be, about dividing something up. It can be about using one thing together or taking turns in the use of, but there is a kind of culture of sharing or an ethos that goes along with it that we've noticed that people react very strongly to, that is about fairness, and about caring for others. And we really saw this divide and this reaction when the sharing economy became, in some cases, even worse than business as usual, right? And they were like, this is not the sharing economy, And so I think there is this, just want to point that out. And then, practically speaking, I could see partnering with you guys to help you or help your community do map jams and ShareFest to take that strategy. It's very successful and catalytic. There are even cities and partners that without our support, just took our idea and they keep doing ShareFest every year. And it's just a great way to bring people together. The ethos of sharing connects us in a different and more positive way than our larger culture, which in the United States is getting pretty toxic, in my opinion. And this is a nice antidote, to frame a gathering around sharing. It invites different behaviors and ways of relating, more generosity, more openness and collaboration. So let's talk if that seems interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds really exciting. A few years ago, I was on a panel with sister cities, and there was a representative from Spain, and it might have been Madrid, but what they had been doing, a whole concept of shareable in a different way, is that they had small music concerts throughout the city. Neighborhood concerts, not big name bands or singers. And so it was like a weekend, and it was a weekend of small performances, so people could really migrate across the city to find their choice of entertainment or to experience some new things. So I think that's another way of taking shareable. And the whole concept.
I love that. Sorry to overtalk, but I love that. I'm just excited because I love that idea, Marilyn, because that's a way of getting people out of the private sphere. And I feel like the time we're in, there's a kind of retreat to the private sphere, that the world is kind of chaotic and polarizing sort of media and politics, and inviting people into the street together to enjoy music. That's a very simple and powerful way to bring people out together, and be a public.
Yeah. You know, just a couple days ago, Mimi and I were on a Axiom News webinar, and that's out of Canada and Toronto, but the focus was on Winnipeg, and there was reference to a book called Happy City, and I've not read it, but one of the ideas that were shared was of trying to have people begin to think of their private space, which they usually hold very dear, in the backyard. So they do their gatherings there, their cooking, and maybe even entertainment, games of such. But the whole idea that was presented was to move your life to your front yard. Bring your garden that you have in the back and bring it in the front,
Yep.
so that people see you working and get into conversation and begin the concept of sharing with one another the produce that's being planted. The other thing is that, you know, perhaps to do a seating area, a small patio in the front instead of the back, so that it brings people into a sort of communion with one another. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of another concept of shareable.
Love that too. It reminds me of a couple of things. This project called Edible Todmorden, if I'm getting it right, in the UK. And it's an NGO with their partners. They've made their little market town in the UK almost every spare piece of land they grow food. And it's become so successful, like people travel there. It's like a tourist attraction because it's so incredible. So their town is a garden. I mean, how beautiful is that? It's like a little Eden, you know? So that's really interesting. They also, in the UK, they also have this thing called the Big Lunch. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they did it for a few years, and it was just people putting, you know, huge, sometimes yards and yards of table on their street and like sharing lunch together.
Yeah.
You know, and on a you know, during when weather's good, spring or summer, and it's just a big celebration. You know, just bring people out on the street to share a meal and break bread. You know, it's powerful. It's simple and powerful. And you know, and the map jams and ShareFest, the sort of events that we've helped people host, and that we've hosted ourselves, they can be adapted in these ways. You know, I mean, by all means, bring in the food, bring in the art, right? and you know, make it a celebration. That's really important, especially share. It's a festival, so you know, it should be celebratory, right?
Well, here's a question from Felipe, and it is: how do we convince developers to create more public communal spaces instead of more apartments to rent or condos to sell through?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But you know, the way to talk to developers, you know, if you're talking to a commercial developer at least, is to talk about, it's about the bottom line. And you know, a case can be made that when you take this sort of development strategy where you have, you know, modestly sized private space and more shared space, more community, and more amenities, including sharing services, this can be extremely profitable because you can get more per square foot, and you also potentially have more service revenue. But you have to think about the project differently, not just of the project as maybe something that you just build and sell, but maybe you hold on to it and becomes this you know, steady you know, profitable revenue stream for you. So I think that's one way to think of it. Another way to think of it is to become the developer yourself. And more people are doing it around the world. Residents, you know, usually in groups, sometimes small groups, sometimes larger groups, where you get together, you pull your capital, you buy the land, you plan your community, and then you hire someone, a general contractor often, to, you know, manage the building process. So you know, and that you know, co-housing is done that way. Co-op housing is done that way. You know, there are more challenges to that because banks don't understand that often, those models, but that's changing too. In Germany, They have where resident driven development, is pretty big relative to other countries. The Green Bank there, associated with the Green Party, understands this way of building, and so finance is more available and credit is more available to projects like that, and they can be not only drivers for more green living, more shared living, but also more equity in housing. Is that if a group of people get together to get a loan, in that group there can be people who normally would not be able to get credit because of their credit history or income or whatever the case, but they can, in a group, they can qualify and become part of the community. So then you can have a sort of natural occurring or more organic sort of form of having below market housing or more affordable housing. And also that's the other another way to make it more affordable is if you're the developer, you don't build for the market, you build for the residents. You can build more economically, you can have lower costs. You're making it for your needs, not because this is what sells in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking of a multi-purpose building that I'm quite fond of in Delhi. It is an incredible piece of ingenuity. So in the bottom part, it's located in a small park. The bottom part of the building is a bookstore and a coffee store. The second, or the entrance where you come in, is gallery space for a couple floors, and then artists residence above, and studio space, and then artist residence. And it all pays for itself.
Right.
Which is really, a wonderful concept. There's an extension of the previous question, and that is, how do we change the idea in cities and towns that are car-centric to move into more public transportation? The issue always is money, and as normal human beings that are not rich, it seems like our ask is out of this world.
$1 million question or $1 billion question, right? I think you look to cities that have already made this transition and really see how they did it. I mean, that's maybe the best answer. It seems like this is maybe a fellow, citizen of the United States talking, and it's been a tougher nut to crack here because we have such a strong car culture. And kind of free market economy as well. But actually COVID has started to spark a change in this. Streets became more open and public, closed down for car traffic to give people more space and for restaurants to have dining outside. This happened in our town here where I live in Mountain View. And it's been just incredible. And I think this is going to continue on. And so that's a start. When people, I think that's one way that you do it is you trial it. Because people have a lot of questions and fears, especially merchants. They want parking spaces, they want through traffic. But if you do it for a short period and try it, and then people can see how it works, they may be more willing to get on board and for the shift. And usually, it's a net positive for merchants and on a high street, as you would say in the UK, Main Street here. People slow down, more foot traffic, more bike traffic, our downtown was already pretty vibrant. It's just become more so. Like people come from all over the place, to our little town to come and dine. We have really amazing sort of Pan-Asian food scene going on here. So, making the most of it with the new like shut down streets and pedestrian kind of mall right in the middle of the city.
Yeah. You've already mentioned this is a question. What?
Sorry, I just wanted to hop in. I really like Neil's answer because I think that it applies to a lot of folks who sign on to these monthly calls in seeing what other cities have done successfully for an issue that you're struggling with in your own city. And I just wanted to plug that for compassionate communities, especially one of the greatest resources is your fellow compassionate communities. It may seem like you're sort of siloed in your own community, but the Charter for Compassion as a network can really help in terms of, if take the example of public transportation versus car economy. You know, if that's something that your city is struggling with, you might reach out to the network of other compassionate cities, and maybe someone else has some advice, something they've done successfully, something they've trialed successfully, like you mentioned, Neil. So I just wanted to hop in and
yeah. Just to add to that, Mimi, I mean, definitely, I strongly second that. Is that, you know, cities, you know, there are groundbreaking cities, but more often than not, what cities do is they look to their neighbors, their sister cities, the innovator cities, and see what they're doing and then adapt it, you know, take it and make it their own. And this is one of the reasons why we did our book, Sharing Cities. It's filled with examples and model policies, what other, you know, it kind of breaks the fear down. Like, I don't know if we want to do that. And, oh, but they've done it. Read about this. This is how they did it. And this is what they got out of it, you know? So it makes changing a lot less scary.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Neil and Mimi. This is, you had mentioned Tufts and your involvement with Tufts. And the question is there a way that this content can be known to urban planning programs in other colleges, essentially? And, you know, certainly this might be one of the ways that the charter might help by just any of the universities that we have as compassionate universities, colleges, and technical schools. We might be able to have a shared newsletter that we get out about Shareable and the ideas that are there. But I'm wondering, beyond Tufts, are there other universities that are involved?
Oh, just countless universities have urban planning departments. You know, and just by the way, that everything that we're doing with Tufts will be on shareable.net and through our newsletter. So sign up, you'll get all the sessions. You know, even if you don't attend, you know, and everyone's welcome to attend. We'll have recordings and transcripts, you know, after the fact. So, you know, we've got the stuff from last year. So, you know, yeah, get on Shareable and check it out. Sign up for our newsletter. And then, yeah, just one thing I wanted to mention too is if you guys wanted to do a Compassionate Cities book, our book is Creative Commons. You can, you know, take what you want out of our book, create your own book. And yeah. You know, we designed our book specifically for this purpose. So we've, you know, got versions in Japanese and French, and, you know, people have taken sections of the book and created other material out of it. So that's up for grabs, guys.
Wow.
That's so awesome, Neil. You are walking the Shareable talk.
Well, trying our best. Yeah.
Okay, there's a comment from Marcel. Toronto used to have a yearly event called Caravan for lasting, I'm guessing, for a month. Different cultures would open up space to share their culture, dance, food, music, games, etc. There was a passport. You would get stamped as you visited them.
Oh, neat.
Spaces went across the city. Yeah, that is really neat. That's
so
our
cool.
first chapter in our Charter for Compassion shareable book.
Nice. Yeah, I love that idea. And yeah, just, you know, Toronto is such a diverse city. So it just,
well, here's someone from Toronto who's saying, check out foodshare.net, a Toronto-based food advocacy nonprofit modeling some of what Neil has started and shared here with us. So it's just a little, that's the second chapter of our book, Sarah. So you better start writing. Okay, another question. Where can we learn about grants and funding opportunities by cities and governments to learn of incentives for building things like the ones you mentioned? I mean, by oneself becoming a developer, even as a group, we're putting the money burden on the people that are trying to do good, not the already rich developers.
I'm just reading this question here too. Make sure I understand it. That's a great question. I don't know if I have a really quick answer for that. You know, I'll just share that, you know, if becoming a developer is a challenging undertaking, and I don't know of any public kind of support for that. You know, it's I think that you can get other forms of support. Finding a friendly bank, maybe it's a local bank, maybe it's a credit union, and finding appropriate professional support. So in the co-housing movement, there are co-housing specific developers and consultants that can help you through the process. So I think you just go to cohousing.org to connect with that. There's just a handful in the United States that do this, so you can easily connect to them. You know, I'll put my email if anyone's really interested. I can make some connections. I'll put my in the co-housing movement, there is, I think, this a kind of ecosystem of support that you can tap into, you know, with the right lawyers and the right realtors and the right you know, consultants and architects and so forth.
Yeah, I was just thinking about smaller projects that many cities in the United States have something similar to a community trust where people put their money in and then the trust will manage the money and give out grants. So that might be one way of doing smaller projects, development projects. My guess is that with the federal government, that monitoring the grant situation, which is so much easier now than it was in the past, might be another avenue of finding potential grants for doing things.
I have heard of so co-op housing that has tapped into you know, philanthropic funds, into foundations, and so that's also another thing, you know, especially for you know, underserved communities, people of color, you know, and in low income areas of cities. I think that becomes you know, much more of a possibility. You know, cities more and more, I see a connection between the city government forming a land bank and community land trusts. So,
yes.
You know, cities are getting more interested. It's small still, but you know, definitely space for this growing, getting interested in creating not just below market housing, but permanently affordable housing. And this is what cities should really be going for. And that one of the challenges with cities is that they own a lot of land. Cities do, but they treat it like a private asset, and they connect mostly and frame what they do mostly in market terms. But that is you know, if you're a resident of the city, that belongs to the people, and it should be managed like a commons, like a public asset, and for public benefit, not just to reap the market returns. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, it's no secret that developers are often one of the most powerful actors in cities. And you know, if you want to change this paradigm, then you gotta, you know, organize. But I think what would help in those kind of efforts is to have thought out alternative to what cities are doing currently, because they don't know how to operate any other way.
Right.
You know, that's just the way they've been doing things time and again. And in my opinion, that a city should never sell land. Why would you do that? Why would you give up control over your territory to private interests? It makes no sense at all. That the land should be in trust, or it should be, you know, maybe long-term leases, and create a steady, stable, long-term revenue for the city. So, you know, the setup benefits private developers, obviously. That's how the way it works right now, but it can work very differently with the right movement, right tools.
I think that what you're moving us to realize is that any compassionate city, any city that's interested in shareable is one where the citizenry really has to take civic responsibility and engagement.
Right. And if you're compassionate and caring, I mean, everyone should have a house. Okay, right? Everyone should have a roof over their head, that kind of dignity that comes with having a place, and a safe place, a clean place, as a platform to be a citizen, to be engaged. Because if you're unhoused, you can't be part of the community, or at least it's very difficult, or more difficult. So yeah, I mean, that's like, I see it almost as like job one. Everyone gets a place to live, and we can arrange ourselves in that way, right? And it doesn't, people, they fight over these different models. Well, that's socialism, and it's free market. That's terrible. It's going to be horrible. We've got to break out of those boxes, and a housing co-op is not socialism. It's voluntary, but you also have to have regulations that allow that kind of mode of housing and building to exist and also compete with other modes, right? Right now, it's the landscape's tilted against these ways of doing things. So, we just got to tilt it our way to the people. Nothing new.
No. Gosh, Neil, the time is running short. And so we certainly want to thank you. And I hope that we will definitely promote people to sign up for the newsletter and to get a copy of the guide that you've shared with us here. And I'm going to turn it over to Mimi to thank you more and to give some last messages. And we'll be getting this on our social media so that others can have a chance to learn from you as well. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks. It was so fun. I really enjoyed this, and with both of you. Mimi, you have the last word, so go ahead.
I don't know that I have anything to add. While I have always appreciated your partnership with the charter, Neil, I felt like my jaw was kind of on the ground as you gave your presentation, just thinking of all the connections that Shareable offers to our community. So as Marilyn said, along with the recording, we'll also be sure to include the resources that you shared with everyone who registered, as well as everyone who will be watching this after the fact on our social media platforms. It's just an invaluable resource to the charter. So thank you again for your willingness to talk with us today. And
so Mimi, can you tell us what's on next month?
It's not yet finalized on the books, so wait for a newsletter confirmation, but we will be featuring the Compassionate Continent of Australia in October, our communities webinar. So we hope you all will join us for that. And I'll also include the link for that, or at least some more information when I send out this recording.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And Neil.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.